Hi, my name is Madeline Mumbert. My student ID number is 3251089, and my course is VTHT 2213 Lab Animal Clinical Management. Today we'll be talking about rats. We'll start with their basic needs like water, nutrition, all that. So for offering water, they need water at all times, and it's recommended that you give it to them in bottle feeders. If you leave water out in dishes, then they get contaminated really quick. For nutrition, they are omnivores, so they need plant protein and animal protein. There are pellets that they make that provide most of their protein, but you can also supplement with fruits, vegetables, and certain seeds. You can also offer cereal and grains and oats in small amounts for treats. You can feed them ad lib, meaning you're free feeding them, but just be cautious with that because obesity is a common problem with rats. Handling, you want to be really gentle. For picking them up, you usually just scoop with one hand under their chest. And you always use your other hand. You always want a hand supporting their hindquarters and their back legs. You can also just let them climb onto you. Sometimes they like to hang out on your shoulder. The one thing you want to avoid completely is picking them up by their tail. Enrichment-wise, they are very smart animals and they need a lot of entertainment, so you can offer them exercise wheels, balls, less complicated things like paper towel rolls, and they also like nesting material, which can range from hay to just towels and blankets, anything that they can nest through. Differentiating rats from mice, I can tell that this is a rat because it's much larger and they can weigh up to twice as much. They have a very thick tail that's usually hairless, and their snout is long and flat. Restraint-wise, again, it's one hand around the thorax, the other hand is supporting their hind legs, and then sometimes I can keep a finger underneath their jaw during restraint to keep myself and my other assistant from getting bit. Scruffing you can do, but it's usually not recommended because they object to it highly. And they do make restraining devices. They have broom-style restraints, flat-bottomed restrainers, and flexible restrainers that you can use if your rat is being uncooperative. For sexing a rat, the way to do that is to measure their anogenital distance, which is the distance from their anus to their genitalia. The distance is longer for males and it's shorter for females. Females also have teat marks, which is another thing to look for. So if you look at this rat, there's her anus back here and there's her genitalia, so it's a very short distance. So this is a female, and she's also got little teat marks that show us that as well. Okay, we'll be demonstrating a subcutaneous injection on this rat. My injection is here. I pulled up 0.1 saline. I'm using a small gauge needle. This is 25 gauge. So my restrainer is holding the thorax with one hand and the hindquarters with another hand. For my sub-Q injection, you can give it either up here or down on a flank. So I'm gonna tent the skin first. When I inject, I'm gonna pull back on my syringe to make sure I don't get a flash of blood. If I don't see any blood, then I'll go ahead and continue with my injection. I'm gonna tent the skin, poke, pull back, and inject. Okay, we'll be demonstrating an IP injection now. So I've pulled up again 0.1 saline. I'm using the same gauge needle. My restrainer is gonna hold one hand with the thorax, the other hand the hindquarters, and she's also gonna restrain one of the back legs for me, the left rear. And then I will extend the right rear leg so that I can inject into this right lower quadrant here so that I avoid hitting important organs like the bladder and the liver. I'm going to inject, pull back, no blood, inject, and then pull out. Okay, now we will be demonstrating oral dosing. So I've pulled up 0.3 saline in this syringe here. My restrainer is holding the same way she held for the IP injection. So I'll be handling the rat's face with my non-dominant hand, and then my dominant hand will have the syringe. So I'm just gonna let it kind of consume the liquid on its own. letting him get just a little bit of time because they can only take so much liquid at a time. Oh, that was good. Okay, so now I will be demonstrating a blood draw from a tail vein. So I have my restrainer who has rolled the rat up in a towel, making sure that she can breathe and that her limbs are in an okay position. The tail is facing towards me so that I can visualize the vein. I'll first wet it with alcohol. I'm using a 22 gauge needle. It's all right. So first wet the tail with alcohol to clean the area and to help me visualize that. And then I'll be using a 22 gauge needle for the blood draw. Okay, so that last clip there was our third attempt at drawing blood on this rat. She's a little stressed out, and so what we're gonna do is, instead of pushing her too far, because this is the only rat that we have, we're gonna let her calm down for a little bit in a quiet kennel by herself. In a normal scenario, when we have patients like this where we can't get a blood draw on the first few attempts and it's stressing them out more than anything, it's the smart thing to do to just allow them to calm down and then come back at another point for another attempt at the blood draw. Hi, my name is Madeline. Today we will be talking about rabbits and their basic care. Starting off, we'll talk about water and nutrition needs. For water, you can offer it to them in either bottle feeders or in dishes, but either way you want to change the water daily. For nutrition, they make pellets that contain most of their nutrients, and you also want to offer them hay. Eating the hay prevents a lot of blockages and hairballs, which they're prone to. They also like certain vegetables, and they can get small amounts of oats and barley as treats. It's usually recommended to also offer wooden chewing toys for even wear pattern of their teeth. It's not recommended to free feed them. We should avoid that and monitor calories instead, because they can be prone to becoming overweight. Handling them, you want to be firm but gentle, and you want to be quiet when you're around them. You can scruff them, but it's got to be a light scruff. Usually minimal restraint is the way to go. They can stress really easily. Enrichment-wise, you can offer things that they can dig through. They like digging platforms. They also like places to hide, so you can get them boxes or tunnels. And then usually any sort of wood toy in any shape or size, that way they have something to chew on. To tell if this is a rabbit as opposed to something else that looks similar, like a guinea pig, rabbits are much larger, they have larger ears, and they are nocturnal. Restraint-wise, again, susceptible to stress, so when I pick them up, I usually just scoop them, and you want to have their feet kind of pressed up against you so that they're secure. And if they want to hide, they can hide, but you just kind of hold them like a football. But minimal restraint is usually the best way to go. And you always want to have one hand supporting their hindquarters. You can scruff them, but it's got to be light so that you don't stress them out. Restraining devices are less is more with rabbits. Usually just a towel or a blanket or a drape will suffice for that. Sexing your rabbit, this is done by, we're going to cradle her and then we're going to look in her vent area. So we'll gently cradle her. And if you look in her vent area, so she's got, if I push down lightly with my fingers, this will protrude. And there's a slit at the end. So females have slits and males have little holes. So that's usually how you can tell. This one has a slit, so that's a female. Males, if they're intact, they'll also have testicles, which is another tall tale sign. Okay, now I will be demonstrating a subcutaneous injection on a rabbit. To do this, the most common area is the intrascapular space, or the space in between their shoulder blades. You want to tent their skin, that way you know that you're underneath the skin and not in any muscle or anything. This is the saline that we'll be using, 1 ml of saline. So I'll tent the skin first. Poke through the skin, pull back to make sure there's no blood, and then inject. Go. Okay, today we will be demonstrating a blood draw from the marginal ear vein of a rabbit. To do this, we will sterilize the area first with some alcohol. This will also help us see the vein a little better. My restrainer is just holding my rabbit and a towel, and then she will also hold off the ear vein for me. To draw blood, I'll be using a 25 gauge needle. I think it's just go up here. Well, there's a flash of blood there. So that means that we were in the vein. Okay, so now we will be handling birds. I have my bird here, his name is Andy. Being able to tell birds apart from other animals, they have a couple characteristics that are unique to them. Birds have feathers, and they have wings, and they have beaks. And regarding the feathers, they have primary and secondary feathers. The primary feathers they use to thrust forward, and the secondary feathers they use to lift themselves up off the ground when they fly. When you're restraining a bird, and you'll see in a second, you need to be really gentle. We'll be using a towel to help, but to firmly scoop them up from wherever they're at in their cage. You want to evaluate your bird first before you go in and grab them to evaluate their mentation, see if they're stressed out, and you'll be able to tell by their breathing if it's labored or rapid, and sometimes if they're stressed out enough, they'll open mouth breathe. But you want to avoid stress as much as you can, because they can stress out really easily and they can overheat, so you want to minimize your handling time. Also, when you're holding them, you want to avoid accidentally obstructing their sternum, because that can compromise their respiration. For birds, their respiration rate is usually around 60 beats per minute, and their heart rate is around 200. Their temperature can range from 102 to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, just depending on the type of bird that you have. Mentation of this bird, he's a little stressed out. He's a little mad at me, and you can tell because his feathers are fluffed and his breathing is slightly rapid, but he's not open mouth breathing. He's not stressed out to the point where I won't be handling him. Quick evaluation of this bird, looking at his eyes and his nares, everything is clear. There's no discharge. His ears, there's nothing obstructing those. And then stool, quick evaluation of stool at the bottom of the kennel, or cage rather. They have 3 types of excrement. They have liquid urine, which you can see is the yellow on the bottom. They have white urates, which is like an in-between, and then they have their regular stool droppings of feces, which is the colored black and brown. Okay, so I have my towel here. I'm going to open this cage door. And I'm gonna kind of shoo him over into a corner or onto his perch so that I can reach him. We've removed a lot of the perches and toys out of this so that in his panic he doesn't get tangled in anything. Okay, I'm gonna hand him to my restrainer, but there's a gentle hand behind the wings keeping them together, and then another hand supporting beneath the tail. For the nail trim, you're just going to tip the very ends. They have quicks just like cats and dogs. So if you cut into that, you'll make them bleed. So we're just tipping them. I know, Andy.
Do you want to hold the foot?
Yeah. Sorry. Let me see your toe. Okay.